Good evening, everyone. The race for president got a little more interesting today with the official announcement from Senator Barack Obama.
Obama's national political resume is thin, just 2 years in the U.S. Senate. Obama called his bid an improbable quest. Early polls show him third, trailing both Senator Hillary Clinton and John Edwards. Polls also indicate he starts the race as the most likable candidate.
3 years ago, you were a state legislator here in Springfield. What makes you think that you're qualified to be president of the United States? You don't have any doubts that you're ready? No. Where do you get all this confidence?
She's the front runner. Hillary Clinton's running very high in the polls.
Hillary is inevitable. Everybody's on her side.
It appears Hillary is the inevitable nominee.
She's got this Democratic nomination locked up.
You can't stop her.
She's unbeatable.
Unstoppable, unbeatable. Hang on to your health care and start measuring the inaugural pantsuit. It's over.
Hearing he doesn't even know the national anthem. He wouldn't use the Holy Bible with the Muslim beliefs and...
You know that's not true.
No. I'm just... This is what I've been told.
There are African Americans who don't think that you're black enough, who don't think that you have had the required experience.
Barack Obama is the most popular president in modern US history. He had the highest approval rating of any president when leaving office, and many people actually asked him to run for a third term, despite the fact that the Constitution doesn't even let him. Although the narrative surrounding the election might have leaned towards more of an even race, the reality was very different. In 2008, George Bush had completely run the economy into the ground, creating one of the biggest financial crashes in modern US history.
Funny story, you know all that money that we've been giving to the banks? They don't have it anymore. Yeah, it's gone.
The stunning collapse of Bear Stearns, one of the world's largest investment banks.
Really a stunning collapse.
It was a manic Monday in the financial markets. The Dow tumbled more than 500 points after two pillars of the street tumbled over the weekend. Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old firm, filed for bankruptcy. Brought down by bad mortgage investments, Lehman, which has 25,000 employees, will be liquidated. Meanwhile, Merrill Lynch, fearing it could be next, agreed in an act of desperation to a shotgun marriage with Bank of America. So in just 6 months, 3 of the 5 biggest independent firms on Wall Street have now disappeared.
Major sectors of America's financial system are at risk of shutting down, and ultimately our country could experience a long and painful recession.
And he's urging lawmakers to set politics aside to get something done.
The House rejected the $700 billion bailout plan, sending shockwaves through Wall Street. And that is the largest single-day point loss ever.
Weekly jobless claims hit a 26-year high. Many economists now believe this downturn will be the most severe since the recession of the early 1980s.
In 2008, the Democratic Party could have elected an actual fucking donkey to be president, and he still would have won based on how badly George Bush did. In fact, on the night of the election, David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager, was so certain of victory that it actually made him uncomfortable. Although most US elections tend to be centered around the narrative of Democrats and Republicans, in 2008, Obama's real battle was not with the Republicans. It was within his own party. Obama's chances against the Republicans was nearly 100%, but his chances against another fellow Democrat was practically only 10%. The senator of New York City and the former First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton. She had national name recognition, endorsements from big political figures, and most importantly, money. Looking at the early polls, Obama was losing to Clinton by over 30 percentage points. Politics, a 30% margin is not considered bad, it's considered hopeless. So how did a university professor of Chicago, who had Hussein as his middle name during the era of 9/11, become the president of the United States in just 2 years? Today, I'm going to be breaking down exactly how Barack Obama beat one of the most experienced and well-funded political campaigns in the entire world, aptly dubbed the Clinton Machine. Obama's rise to politics has a theme to it: perverts, creeps, and pedophiles. Let me tell you about this guy, Mel Reynolds. He was a sitting congressman of Illinois, and right before his re-election campaign, he was indicted for having sex with a 16-year-old staff volunteer. And you're saying to yourself, well, Dan, he's a politician and he's a pedophile, so what? There's lots of them. Well, this pedophile is a little bit special. because in order for us to find out that he was having sex with a 16-year-old, he actually asked this campaign staff volunteer, and he went, "Hey, you see that hot 15-year-old campaign volunteer? Can you go take nudes of her for me?" So he was fucking somebody underage, and he wanted an upgrade, or I guess in this case, a downgrade. When he was publicly accused and outed for having sex with a 16-year-old, he was just like, "Y'all are hating on me because I'm black." And I guess it kind of worked, because he ran unopposed and he won his re-election seat by default, basically. And then he was criminally indicted for having sex with a 16-year-old and basically forced out of Congress. Anyway, thanks to this lying, cheating, race-baiting, pornographic pedophile, there was now an open seat in the US Congress. And that began the political journey of our lovable Barack Obama. Oh, and if you're wondering where Mel is today, he's not in US prison anymore, because when Bill Clinton got elected, he actually pardoned Mel because I guess he found the pervert relatable or something. After he got out, he ran for his old seat, lost twice, and then he moved to Zimbabwe, where he was convicted of making pornography. Anyway, now that the serial pornographer's seat was open, Obama got his shot in public office. He didn't want to run for Congress right off the bat, but his local state senator, Alice Palmer, decided that she wanted to run for that pedopornographer's vacant seat. And when she made the commitment that she was going to run in Congress, she endorsed Obama and encouraged him to run for her old Senate seat. Obama was afraid that Alice would lose her congressional race and decide to re-run for her state Senate seat, so he actually initially declined to run. But Alice assured him that even if she lost her race for Congress, she would refrain from running against Obama for her old seat. To completely reassure Obama that she would not run for this seat, she actually publicly endorsed him. Because running against someone that you personally have publicly endorsed would make you look like an idiot. And then she lost her congressional race and totally ran against Obama like an idiot. And like an even bigger idiot, she did not even get the required signatures to be able to run for Illinois State Senate, deciding instead to try and forge many of the signatures required. Barack Obama ran unopposed and was elected to the Illinois State Senate in 1996. Obama didn't really seem to enjoy his time in the state Senate. State senators don't offer much in terms of actual power. It's like being a local congressman, but he's not even paid enough to do his actual job. So Obama basically decides to run for Congress because he feels like he doesn't have enough influence in the state Senate. In Obama's own words, his run for Congress was a complete disaster. Here's a summary. People accused him of being a white black, basically a black person who was Harvard educated and elite who didn't understand the everyday struggles of the regular African American, and his primary opponent, Bobby Rush, tragically lost his son in a street shooting, giving him a massive sympathy vote, essentially suspending the Obama campaign. He ended up losing that election by 30 points, which in politics means he never had a shot. Political campaigns are not cheap, especially for the losers because they have nothing to fall back on. At the age of 39, right as he was approaching his 40th birthday, Barack Obama was completely broke. At this time of his life, Obama had assumed that he would not make a return to politics. The campaign had cost him and his family dearly, both emotionally and financially. He hadn't been able to spend as much time at home, not being able to raise his young 2 daughters, and it put a strain on his marriage with Michelle.
Has it put strains on the marriage from time to time?
Oh, no.
Absolutely, it has.
But despite his wife's objections, Obama continued to seek opportunities to get into public office. And in 2003, an Illinois Senate seat opened up. Peter Fitzgerald was the U.S. Illinois Senator for 2004. This guy is a stern Republican, and he had been able to piss off everyone in the Illinois government. Here's what he did. Peter Fitzgerald wanted to appoint a U.S. attorney to investigate crimes in Illinois. Illinois' politicians did not want that because they were criminals. His pick for U.S. attorney actually ended up prosecuting the 39th and 40th governors of Illinois. 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. Republican was caught for tax evasion, racketeering, fraud, that sort of shit. The Democratic one, he was accused of trying to sell off Obama's Senate seat after he had been elected to the presidency of the United States. Eventually, the Democratic senator got pardoned by Donald Trump because, I don't know, I guess Trump found a convicted criminal relatable or something. So in 2004, Obama decides to run for Senate. He completely dominates the Democratic field with 52% of the vote. He got huge endorsements along the way. The Chicago Tribune, Sun-Times, the biggest unions of Chicago, and the daughter of Paul Simon, the last Democratic U.S. Illinois senator who died days before he planned to publicly endorse Obama. Oh, and his main opponent on the Democratic side, he was accused of domestic violence by his wife. So, Obama easily cruises his way to the Democratic nomination of Illinois Senate. Now, on the Republican side, Obama was running against a guy called Jack Ryan. He is married to a smoking hot model called Carrie Ryan. Jack Ryan, the family man Republican candidate, was pressuring his wife, Carrie Ryan, on several occasions to go into strip clubs all over the world and have sex while strangers watched. When that came out, he withdrew from the race, but the Republicans, they couldn't really find anyone to replace him with. Eventually, a guy called Alan Keyes decided to run, who had a record for losing twice in the Senate in Maryland, and then he set a Illinois government record when he lost to Obama by 40 points, the largest deficit that any candidate has ever seen.
With me here at this table are the two major party candidates who want to be Illinois' next United States Senator, and they are Republican Alan Keyes and Democrat Barack Obama. What would you say has been the greatest blunder of the war?
Well, I'm not sure there has been, in my opinion, any egregious blundering. Barack Obama was just suggesting, and you start saying that we can better handle the problem of helping families that are in poverty. It turns out government doesn't do that better because there's a moral dimension to that problem where you need to give the help, you need to have churches, you need to have synagogues, you need to have the organizations that can walk with people on an emotional and spiritual basis.
You know, when a child doesn't have health insurance, they don't need a lecture, they need health insurance. When
Obama's U.S. Senate run would be the first time that he unveiled his infamous "Yes, we can" slogan, versus Alan Keyes' slogan, which was, "Yes, I cannot win any elections." There's a lot of different reasons as to why Obama was so dominant in this race compared to how badly he got beat in his last race. But the biggest one was his Democratic convention speech. I don't know if this is going to go down as one of those iconic American history speeches like "I Have a Dream" or "We Choose to Go to the Moon," but this is definitely by far Obama's best speech that he ever gave.
For alongside our famous individualism, there's another ingredient in the American saga. A belief that we're all connected as one people. If there's a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me even if it's not my child. If there's a senior citizen somewhere who can't pay for their prescription drugs and having to choose between medicine and the rent, that makes my life poorer even if it's not my grandparent. If there's an Arab American family being rounded up without benefit of an attorney or due process, that threatens my civil liberties. There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America. The pundits like to slice and dice our country into red states and blue states. Red states for Republicans, blue states for Democrats. But I've got news for them too. We worship an awesome God in the blue states, and we don't like federal agents poking around in our libraries in the red states. We are one people, all of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes, all of us defending the United States of America.
Although his convention speech propelled him to the Senate, the man that he was endorsing in that speech, John Kerry, did not win the presidency. In fact, the Democrats had actually failed to retake either the House or the Senate from the Republicans. And the Republicans were so confident in their economy in 2004 that they were actually talking about installing a permanent Republican majority. This was in 2004 when the economy was sky high and housing prices were booming. Although you might hear people say things like polls don't matter, the reality is polls absolutely matter. Political polls are kind of like weather forecasts. Sure, they're not perfect. They don't always get it right. And sometimes they're just completely dead wrong. And they're pretty much useless if you look into the future more than a month. But if you're expecting it to rain, are you not going to look at the weather forecast? Political polls can be very unreliable for one big reason. There's a lot of fake ones out there trying to push a certain narrative. Unlike weather forecasts, there's no team rain or team drought telling you that their side is winning more. But if polls were really that unreliable, political campaigns would certainly not be paying as much attention to them, and they definitely would not be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money to run their own polls. In the early days of the Democratic primaries, there looked like there would be three likely candidates: Barack Obama, the senator of Illinois, John Edwards, senator of North Carolina, and of course, New York Senator Hillary Clinton.
Hillary is inevitable. Everybody's on her side.
It appears Hillary is the inevitable nominee.
She's got this Democratic nomination locked up.
You can't stop her.
She's unbeatable.
I am Hillary. I am inevitable. Honestly, at this point in the race, I don't blame anyone for thinking that. Hillary was up 30 points in the polls nationally across all states. Yes, Obama was the first black senator, but most people still didn't know or care who the hell he was. David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager, said this: "We need to run a perfect campaign, and even if we do run one that's near perfect, the odds are still heavily against us. If frontrunners stumble, that usually leads to disaster for them, but they still usually win anyway. Money runs elections. That's not a secret, and whether you like it or not, that's a cold, hard reality. Every politician needs to raise a ton of money to hire staff, build out infrastructure, and most importantly, advertise to get their message out there. Most presidential campaigns need to raise at least $10 million just to have a chance of being president. Hillary was senator of New York, and she still had $10 million left over from her Senate campaign. She was allowed to use all of this to fund her presidential campaign. Obama did not have $0 left over from his Senate campaign. He had debt left over from his Senate campaign. Hillary, on the other hand, raised $21 million for her primary campaign. $21 million was the record at that time for the most amount of money raised for a presidential campaign. The Clinton money-raising machine was the best in Democratic history. Okay, this is my hot take, but seriously, why is everyone just okay with how expensive elections are? Elections have been getting more and more expensive every single year. A report estimates that $10 billion will be spent on campaign advertising alone this year. $10 billion! That money could go to healthcare, education, literally anything else other than more generic, "I approve this method, blah, 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 blah." We should have an election where politicians are forced to pick an issue, fix it, and then we elect you based on how well you fixed it. How good you are at advertising has nothing to do with how good of a president you're gonna be. So, how is Obama going to beat somebody with more name recognition, more money, more credibility, and more experience for the hardest job in the world? He did something crazy, something that political insiders laughed at him and said that it was practically impossible to do. Barack Obama was going to rely on young people to vote. There's a reason politicians don't care about young people. We just don't vote. We don't reliably vote, we don't stay up on the issues, and even when it does come to voting time and we want to vote for someone, we come up with some sort of excuse. It's not our fault, we're young people. We have much more important things to do. Things like making memes on TikTok and rewatching One Piece. Have you seen One Piece? It's very good, you should watch it. But this was Obama's only way to the presidency. He was relying on a group of people that historically only turned out to elections about 10 to 15% of the time. This is because he ran his own political polls, and he knew from these polls that old people were never going to vote for him because most old people were set on Hillary Clinton. It is harder to get somebody to change their vote than it is to get a new voter excited for your campaign. If you're already in love with someone, it's unlikely that you'll fall in love with somebody else. Obama knew from his own polling that older people were dead set on Hillary Clinton, which means that he was not going to be able to turn that needle whatsoever. Was Clinton arrogant in thinking that she had the nomination locked up? Yes. Did she have every right and reason to be? Also yes. If the most reliable group of voters, old people, are overwhelmingly in favor of you, you have every right to be confident. Because he was unable to turn any more voters, Obama had to do something crazy. He had to expand the voting pool. He wasn't going to be able to win the support of people who had already voted in past elections. He needs to get new voters on board and into the process. While it sounds very cool, historically, it is almost impossible to do.
I remember a conversation I had with Senator Obama in Boston, I think, and he told me that John F. Kennedy spent 60 days campaigning for president, and that he had spent 80 days in Iowa.
83, but who's counting?
It was huge for you.
Yeah, it was everything.
If all the states voted at the same time, no one would really care about Iowa. They don't offer that many delegates and aren't a great representation of America as a whole. If we're talking strategically in terms of raw delegate counts, most candidates would choose to focus on big states like New York and California. But since Iowa is the first state to vote, they set the tone for the rest of the election cycle. Politics is a sport, and momentum is seriously underestimated. Over 50% of Democrats weren't 100% sure on Clinton. If we beat her in Iowa and the other early states, we would potentially be able to generate enough momentum and watch as everyone else drops out. We will take in the voters of those who drop out, and eventually we will end up in a 1 versus 1 with Hillary Clinton. This was Obama's campaign strategy, their only way to victory: win Iowa. Although today the internet is our main source of news, back in 2008, most voters were still glued to their TV screens. And the news pundits made a lot more impact than they do today. And for them, they loved Barack Obama, because he was an underdog and he got a lot of attention. The brand new shiny senator from Illinois taking on the big established baddie from New York. They were pushing that underdog Obama story all day long. Any sort of issues or errors from the Clinton campaign were focused upon and magnified.
Like nearly everyone in the news media, the three of us are totally in the tank for Senator Obama. We will make every effort tonight to keep this bias hidden, but should it become obvious, please remember, we're only human.
Senator Obama, are you comfortable? Is there anything we can get for you?
Clinton's strategy of her get the vote out could be summed up in one single word: endorsements. It's a similar strategy to how Obama got elected into the Senate. Let's say that you want the vote of a small county in Iowa who's never heard of you. How do you do that? You could run political ads, but those are expensive and probably aren't that cost effective. You could campaign in Iowa, but you only have so many days and so much time before people actually vote. Or you could just get somebody to endorse you. A local big shot, a mayor, a union leader, someone with a lot of street cred in whatever district that you're looking to get the vote for. That was Clinton's strategy in 2008. Get endorsements. Get political insiders, reputable figures to endorse her and let them put her into the presidency. And to be honest, that is not at all a bad strategy. Play it by the book. Do what has always worked for everyone else. Obama took a different approach. He wanted a grassroots organization. He wanted neighbors talking to neighbors to say to them, hey, I live in your community. I have the same problems and the same issues that you have. I believe that Barack Obama is the right guy for us, and I think you should come out for him. Although Obama's grassroots strategy sounds in theory a lot more appealing than big political endorsements, it is really hard to get thousands of people to volunteer and knock on doors for you and campaign for you all across Iowa. But many of Obama's speeches went viral on the internet, and he received a flood of donations and volunteers across Iowa who had moved in from various states just to campaign for him. In the general election against the Republicans, Obama ended up with 95% of the black vote. This was a big reason that many pundits and people across the country believed that Barack Obama won. But in the early states, this was absolutely not the case, especially in Iowa. At the start of the race, Hillary Clinton wasn't just beating Barack Obama in black supporters, she doubled his black support. And there were a couple of reasons for this. Because Hillary's strategy was focused on endorsements, she got a lot of prominent African American leaders to endorse her early on in the race. Some black voters interpreted this as Obama ignoring them. Some even suggested that he was taking the black vote for granted because of his own skin color. Obama was getting daily calls from friends and supporters every time another prominent African American leader endorsed Hillary. Obama wasn't ignoring the black community because he was sure that they would eventually vote for him. He was ignoring the black community because he was focused in on Iowa. Iowa is 90% white today, and back in 2008, it was even whiter. Iowa is sort of like a mayo sandwich made of cryptocurrency. If you do the math, it's pretty easy to see why Barack Obama didn't focus on black people early on in the race. Black people aren't in Iowa. But Obama himself was still terrified that he would eventually lose to Senator Clinton. He still saw his campaign from a position of fear, and fear was one of the biggest reasons that black people were not supportive of Barack Obama. Many black folks were scared to hope. In a country where just 50 years ago, black people were treated like second-class citizens, the idea of a black man actually becoming president was, in many people's minds, simply impossible. And until Obama became the frontrunner, many black Americans were simply just too scared to hope. Hope in fear of their perceived inevitable disappointment. To them, something like this could only be too good to be true. Over the course of the campaign, many older black women would tell Michelle Obama that perhaps it was better to have a husband rather than a president, insinuating that even if Barack Obama was to be elected, he would almost certainly be assassinated, like many other presidents before.
I prayed a lot about it because I have a lot of doubt, but I'm still praying for him, that if he makes it, that he will be safe. Because I hate for something to happen to him, a young man, and a young family, so I pray that things go well for him.
One of the biggest reasons that Obama had a good shot in the first place was because of Clinton's arrogance. Obama's campaign slogans were change and yes we can. Hillary's campaign slogan was in it to win it, a not so subtle message that she was inevitable.
I'm running for president and I'm in it to win it.
Hey guys, I'm up 30 points across all states nationally. Why are you even voting for anyone else? I'm just gonna win anyway. What, you actually donated to that Obama guy? I'm just gonna win anyway. Why are you wasting it? Just give me more. This message, the idea that she had paid her dues, that she had been in the Senate longer, that she had endured harassment by the Republicans, that she was deserving to be president, didn't sit well with many voters. Early voting states like Iowa love the attention they get during these primaries. They don't want to hear about how California, Hillary is up 30 points and the election's over before it's begun. They want to pick their own guy. They want to have a voice in this election, and for them, their guy was Barack Obama. Running for president is kind of like running a startup business. As the old saying goes, it's easier to get 100 people to spend $1,000 than it is to get 1,000 people to spend $100. While Hillary focused on the big donors, which was considered the much more easier approach, Obama once again took the harder approach, focusing on the small donors. He set up a website, posted his speeches there, and talked about the issues that matter to him. Here's the biggest difference between Obama's campaign and everyone else's, and it's one of the biggest reasons that he was able to raise so much more money. Most of the time, if a political campaign is asking you for money, it'll sound something like this. Hey, I know you're busy, and I know times are tough, but if you believe in me and my ability to make the country better, could you spare some change? Obama's fundraising message took a little bit more of a hard approach. The message wasn't give me money if you believe in me. It was, if you want change, do something about it. Give us money, volunteer, caucus, fight. If you don't get change. Deal with it. This strategy actually worked. Despite the fact that Clinton went the easy route and raised $21 million from big donors, Obama raised $31 million in the primary from small contributions. Technically speaking, Obama is the first GoFundMe president. Narrative is everything in a political campaign, and while other campaigns saw their supporters as ATM machines, the Obama campaign treated their supporters a lot differently. Every time they sent you an email, it wasn't just to buy merch or to ask for more money for the next thing. They talked about campaign strategy, what they were doing with the money that they had got, and what their path to victory looked like. They were trying to build a relationship with the voters because they didn't want you to just give money or buy merch. They wanted you to volunteer, to caucus, to really be involved in the Obama campaign. And that takes a lot more dedication than just sending $50. The Obama campaign was one of the first to try and form a social relationship between the supporters and the campaign staff. And because Clinton had taken most of her money from big money donors, a lot of them were capped out at $3,000, which means that they could no longer donate more money as the campaign went on. But because Obama was getting most of his money from small money donors, they were nowhere near hitting the cap. Now, all of these things sound very good for Obama, but that did not mean that he was in a good position to win yet. David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager, said that they were basically the rebels in Star Wars and that they were going up against the Empire. Hillary's campaign wasn't too particularly scared of Obama yet. Sure, he'd been able to outraise her in the first quarter, but that was only the first. His announcement speech went viral, but how many times could that happen? Were they going to be able to really continue this momentum down into the other states? After all, they'd been putting all their energy into Iowa. And if they didn't win Iowa, they were pretty much screwed. Obama's campaign of getting new voters out there was making real progress in Iowa. But a lot of the mainstream polls weren't showing this. Some of the lazier polls will just call up a bunch of likely voters, meaning voters who have voted before, and see who they're voting for now. Generally, their sample size is pretty much all old people because, well, old people have had a lot more time to vote for more people. But because Obama's strategy was to get new people and young kids to vote, a lot of these polls did not accurately reflect what actually was going to happen on Election Day. Obama was starting to gain momentum in Iowa through his all-in strategy, but his biggest momentum was coming in from the debates. As we've seen with current President Joe Biden, a presidential debate is a big deal. And if you cannot perform in these debates, you are screwed when it comes to president. But in these early Iowa debates, Obama absolutely performed throughout all of the debates.
Is Barack Obama ready to be president, experienced enough to be president? Senator Biden, you stepped into this last week. You told Newsweek magazine that Senator Obama is not yet ready to be president. Senator Clinton, is he right? You said, I think he can be ready, but right now I don't believe he is. The presidency is not something that lends itself to on-the-job training.
I think that I stand by the statement.
Well, to prepare for this debate, I rode in the bumper cars at the state fair. It worked terrifically.
Do you think Bill Clinton was our first black president?
I would have to, investigate more, Bill's dancing abilities and, some of this other stuff before I accurately judged whether he was in fact a brother. In a race where you've got an African-American and a woman and John. While I was working on those streets, watching those folks see their jobs shipped overseas, you were a corporate lawyer sitting on the board of Walmart. I was fighting these fights.
Senator Obama, you have Bill Clinton's former national security advisor, State Department policy director, and Navy secretary, among others, advising you. With relatively little foreign policy experience of your own, how will you rely on so many Clinton advisors and still deliver the kind of break from the past that you're promising voters?
Well, I am...
I want to hear that.
Well, Hillary, I'm looking forward to you advising me as well. I am proud that you will be our next Secretary of State.
We can now project that Senator Obama will beat Hillary Clinton. A huge, huge victory for Barack Obama.
And I think almost everybody in the political community thought Senator Clinton was going to be the nominee. And if she had won Iowa, she would have been.
Here is someone who 11 months ago people said had no chance. He had a funny name. He's a junior senator, only served 2 years in the U.S. Senate, 8 years in the state legislature. All of a sudden tonight he wins Iowa. But also, this should be expanded. Iowa has never elected an African American to anything.
You have done what the cynics said we couldn't do. As Democrats, Republicans, and independents to stand up and say that we are one nation, we are one people, and our time for change has come.
Obama's Iowa victory was everything that he had been hoping for. They raised $6 million additional right after the victory, and they were getting a flood of supporters and volunteers. Most candidates drop out after the Iowa caucuses, including Obama's future vice president and our current president, Joe Biden. After Iowa, only 3 candidates mattered: Hillary Clinton, John Edwards, and Barack Obama. Although no one even really knows who he is today, John Edwards in 2008 was one of the most well-known political figures. He ran as vice president in 2004 with John Kerry, losing out to George Bush, but he had a very anti-corporation and populist platform that made him very popular among young liberals. He had a very similar message to Bernie Sanders, a much younger, more populist kind of guy. But John Edwards was a lot more politician than Bernie ever was. Let's go over real quick what this degenerate did. So John's wife, Elizabeth, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And in response, John cheats on her with a filmmaker that he hired for his own campaign. She gave birth to their child, and after he was born, John instructed one of his staffers to fake a DNA test to say that the kid wasn't his, and then instructed that same staffer to steal one of the kid's diapers to do a real DNA test to figure out whether or not the kid was really his. Eventually, he was indicted by a grand jury because he actually used campaign funds to try and cover all of this up, and his wife died 1 year before he was criminally convicted. I just want to say, in terms of politicians treating their wives like shit, Donald Trump, you got nothing on John Edwards. Anyway, the public didn't know any of this at the time, and John was polling at about 15%, so his endorsement was pretty valuable. John wasn't going to make it in the final stretch. He was losing more and more points and more ground to Obama and Clinton. So at the end of the campaign, he looked at Obama and said, "Yo, Obama, you know Hillary's gonna win, right? If I endorse you, you should make me your VP." And then Obama was like, "Nah, fam, I'm good."
There is one man who knows in his heart that it is time to create one America, not two, and that man is Barack Obama.
Now the race was a one-on-one, Hillary versus Obama. So far in the early states, Obama had won 2, Iowa and South Carolina. Hillary had won 2 states as well, New Hampshire and Nevada. While the race looked about tied at this point, the reality was much more grim for Obama. By focusing all of his attention and actually winning Iowa, it gave him an actual shot at becoming president. But Hillary's strategy had been to focus on big states like New York and California. And while Obama had proven himself worthy to be a true contender for the Democratic nomination, Hillary was still beating him nationally in polls. And this national lead that she had been generating was completely bet on the idea of this one single event, Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is one of the most infamous days in election cycles. It is the day that 22 states vote for their nominee. 1,681 of the roughly 3,500 delegates are up for grabs in this single day. The biggest Democratic states are also up for grabs in this race. New York and California combined are worth 722 delegates, which is about 20% of the total available delegates.
MSNBC's Monster Tuesday, the king of the primaries, the day that may decide the nominations. Non-stop coverage with cable's mightiest news team. MSNBC Monster Tuesday, tomorrow beginning at 6 a.m. Brought to you by Liberty Mutual.
Bottom line, if you win Super Tuesday, you are the party's nominee. All the data and all the polling suggested that Hillary Clinton would absolutely run away with Super Tuesday. Even Obama's own campaign staff was terrified that they would get blown out of the water on this event. No matter what his campaign did, they were simply not going to be able to make up for the initial investment that Hillary's team put into these giant states. And they knew from their own internal polling that they were 100% for sure going to lose the 2 biggest Democratic states, New York and California. So how would any Democratic candidate for president be able to recover from something as devastating as that? Luckily for Obama, he had 2 critical things that he had going for his campaign that Hillary didn't. 1, money. Obama was now raising a ton from small contributors. After his 20-point margin of victory in South Carolina, he raised over $5 million for his campaign. This allowed him to spend big in New York and California to reduce the lead that Hillary Clinton had built up there. The second was the enthusiasm gap. There is one thing that even the best political polls cannot measure, and that is engagement and enthusiasm. In 2008, a Clinton supporter might be set on voting for Hillary Clinton, but they were not going to campaign for her. They weren't going to knock on doors. They weren't going to donate extra money. They weren't going to try to get their family involved into her campaign. They were just going to do the bare minimum. Obama supporters were far more enthused, far more energetic, and far more willing to go that extra mile to get their guy elected.
Our staff had nothing to do with organizing this. These kids organized it. We just showed up.
It was our first exposure to what came to be known as Obama mania.
Let's just roll. Let's go talk to some people. Hey!
You sensed immediately that something unusual was going on, something rarely seen in American politics.
You guys are too fired up.
5,000 students had turned out to see him, flooding the main floor of the Johnson Center and ringing the floors above.
And even though Hillary Clinton looked like she would walk away with Super Tuesday, at the end of the day, it's not about how many votes you get, it's about how many delegates you get. Even if you can't win the most populated states, if you can win in the correct districts or win by a bigger margin in certain areas, you can technically end up with more delegates. Here was the Obama campaign's plan. We can't win big states like New Jersey. Hillary has already built too much support there. Obama won't be able to convert enough of the voters to take away from the 107 delegates that New Jersey has. But Hillary doesn't have much of a lead in Idaho. So if we focus in on smaller states like Idaho, where big candidates traditionally don't come to campaign, we can run up the numbers and build the lead that we already have there. Here's how that looks on an actual number scale. New Jersey offers 107 total delegates. On Super Tuesday, Hillary wins New Jersey by 10 percentage points, which is a very comfortable win. But this 10% only equates to 11 more delegates gained for her than Obama. Idaho only has 18 delegates, but Obama won Idaho with 80% of the vote, which means he made a net gain of 12 delegates over Hillary Clinton. What that means is all the hard work that Hillary did to win massive New Jersey was rendered completely worthless by Obama's crushing win in Idaho. Obama's blowout wins in smaller states were able to supplant Hillary's wins in big states. Hillary's 9-point win in California was negated by Obama's massive wins in Kansas and Minnesota.
Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton and Republican John McCain scored major victories on Super Tuesday, piling up delegates in key battleground states. Early on, Clinton won the big northeastern states of New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey by comfortable margins. She capped her big night by taking the biggest prize of all, California.
And this was the narrative for Super Tuesday. Obama taking the small states by a big margin, and Hillary winning big states by slim margins. Obama's campaign wasn't trying to beat Hillary Clinton on Super Tuesday. They were just trying to essentially not die. If you had to spend the majority of your campaign in Iowa, and now you're just playing catch up to the rest of the states, if Obama could walk away with just a tie in Super Tuesday, he would be set. By the end of Super Tuesday, the scoreboard looked like this. Hillary Clinton, 837 delegates won. Barack Obama, 847 delegates won. Hillary won every single state that she put her focus and energy in, but Obama's strategy of tiny state sweeps eventually gave him more delegates at the end of the contest. Obama had been hoping for a tie on Super Tuesday. Now Obama was up 28 total delegates over Clinton. He had done far better than even his own campaign would have imagined. Now, if you watch news coverage of the election in 2008, at this point in the race, the narrative would have been, hey, they're neck and neck. This is a really close race that could potentially drag on all the way to the convention. Even though Super Tuesday was close to a tie, the reality is it was a massive victory for Obama's campaign. Having basically tied wasn't just bad for Hillary Clinton, it was devastating. Hillary's strategy was to sweep the big states by huge margins, and while she did win every single big state, her margin of victory wasn't big enough to make her the decisive nominee. Historically speaking, in most presidential elections, the nominee is generally determined around the time Super Tuesday is over. Candidates don't put any more effort into the primaries because generally at this point, the primaries are over because somebody has already won them. Hillary had put all of her eggs into the Super Tuesday basket, which means she actually spent all of her money early on. Hillary Clinton, the establishment candidate, one of the most well-funded and connected party insiders in Democratic history, was now broke. She actually had to loan her own campaign an additional $5 million. This very public event spurred her supporters to continue donating more to her. But in that same month, the Obama campaign announced they had raised an additional $32 million from 500,000 new contributors. The reason that Hillary Clinton was in such deep trouble at this point is because of the demographics of the upcoming elections. Louisiana, Washington, Maryland, Hawaii, Wisconsin, all of them much more liberal, much more left-leaning, much more college-educated, and much more likely to go for Obama.
Fox News can now project that Senator Barack Obama will win the Washington Democratic caucus tonight.
Barack Obama has won Louisiana. That means a sweep tonight. Louisiana, Nebraska, Washington State.
The state of Alabama, an important win in the South for Barack Obama.
But again, a big win for Barack Obama tonight. He did some campaigning in Nebraska. It has paid off for the Obama campaign. Fox News projecting that Obama wins Nebraska tonight.
Barack Obama will win the Wisconsin Democratic primary. This is the 9th win in a row for Barack Obama.
I might just be able to pull it off. We seem to be stirring things up pretty good.
Of the next 11 states, Obama won 100% of them, pulling ahead to become the now frontrunner of the race. But even though Obama had now become the inevitable candidate, the press did not report this so. They had many reasons for dragging out the coverage of the race, the biggest one being the amazing ratings that they were pulling in. But many press members didn't see the race from a delegate count, they saw it from a states won perspective. The headline, "Hillary Clinton wins Texas, comeback inevitable?" is much more clickbaity than "Hillary Clinton wins Texas by 3%. And yes, while Clinton was winning big states like Ohio and Texas, the margins on her victories were just so small, she was not really gaining enough delegates to close the gap that had been created between her and Obama. As the race dragged on, there just wasn't enough delegates left on the chessboard to take. She would have to beat Obama in huge blowout wins, the same that he had already done to her, in order to take back the nomination. As the race dragged on longer and longer, it looked more hopeless for the Clinton campaign. But Hillary Clinton refused to concede. She refused to bow out even though metrics and numbers were telling her that she no longer had a shot. And the reason for that is because there was still technically one more way that Clinton could have received the nomination. And it was by no means a democratic way. It was a decision potentially made by millionaires, party insiders, and Washington politicians. Hillary Clinton was counting on superdelegates. Superdelegates get a vote at the convention. They are party insiders, elected officials, union leaders, and of course, big fundraisers. They get a vote at the convention, which means that technically, in a straight-up contest, their one vote would count for as much as an entire district in the United States of America, representing tens of thousands of people's votes. Hillary was trying to convince all the superdelegates, which represented 15% of all delegate votes, to support her over Obama. Although Obama's lead was pretty much assured by the numbers, that lead was only about 1 to 2 percentage points. If she was able to swing 15% of the delegates from Obama, she would easily be able to become the Democratic nominee. And even though Obama's strategy had been ignore the party establishment, don't go for endorsements, and fight for the people's vote, in the final months of the primaries, Obama spent a not insignificant amount of time calling party insiders and trying to get them to endorse him for president. As Obama said in his memoir, "I never thought this race would come down to me calling a bunch of party insiders and begging for their vote." Now, as undemocratic as that sounds, there were many party insiders who did understand one thing. If the superdelegates decided to screw Obama over and put someone who did not win the Democratic vote, they would be destroying their own reputations. Nancy Pelosi, the leader of the House Democrats, said publicly, if the superdelegates stole the election away from the American people, it would do irreparable damage to the party. Hillary's hope wasn't that the party insiders would vote for her because she wanted to destroy the Democratic Party. She was hoping that Obama's campaign would screw up somewhere. She was hoping that in this superheated race, something or someone would come out and show the world who the real Barack Obama is. And when that happened, the public controversy would be enough that the party insiders would have no choice but to choose Hillary Clinton in order to save the Democratic Party from such embarrassment.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, South Carolina. Thank you. Well, tonight, the cynics who believed that what began in the snows of Iowa was just an illusion were told a different story by the good people of South Carolina.
This was Obama's victory speech after his 30-point margin of victory in South Carolina. It was the last of the early primaries, the states in which his campaign poured most of their focus and energy into. It would also be his first blowout victory against Hillary Clinton. And even before Obama arrived on stage, the people had been chanting, "Race doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, race doesn't matter." Many of these supporters had worked hard throughout the campaign, knocking on doors, saving money, donating what they could, and fighting for what they believed to be true change in America. In Obama's memoir, he talked about how he felt like these voters deserved to take their victory lap, But while he was giving this speech, he thought privately of the Confederate flag that was still hanging on the state capitol, just a few blocks away from where they were. In the year 2008, race still mattered plenty. And while many had claimed that Obama's greatest asset to the presidency was his race, the issue of it nearly destroyed him. Trinity Church is a predominantly African-American megachurch. Much of its success is credited to their energetic pastor, Jeremiah Wright, who, during his tenure as their pastor, took the church's membership from 70 members to well over 8,000 members. Obama was a longtime member of this church, describing his relationship with Jeremiah as a man who gave him much guidance throughout his life. Looking for more controversy as always, the press decided to take all the sermons that Jeremiah gave throughout his time at Trinity and compiled them into a 2-minute montage. Obama compares it to taking the 5 dumbest things anyone has ever said in their life and putting it all together.
But under Clinton, blacks had an intelligent friend in the Oval Office. Oh, but government's changed. The election was stolen. We went from an intelligent friend to a dumb Dixiecrat, a rich Republican who has never held a job in his life. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America? No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America that's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme. The United States government has failed the vast majority of her citizens of African descent.
When this controversy first hit, it was still early in the race. Obama actually defended Wright and pointed to all the good that Trinity does within their community. He refused to cut ties with the church and kept his membership there. He privately asked Jeremiah to take a step back and not make any big public appearances until the heat from the election dies down. For the majority of the race, Jeremiah did just that. But near the end of the race, just as Obama was wrapping up the nomination, Jeremiah decides to go on a press tour, hitting 3 major networks and giving interviews. The Obama campaign was in full ass-clenching mode, terrified he would say something that would derail the campaign. The first 2 interviews, nothing too newsworthy, very restrained and nothing controversial. But the third interview?
You have said that the media have taken you out of context. Can you explain what you meant in the sermon shortly after 9/11 when you said the United States had brought the terrorist attacks on itself? Quote, America's chickens are coming home to roost.
First of all, you heard that I was quoting the ambassador from Iraq. That's number one. Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You cannot do terrorism on other people and expect it never to come back on you. Those are biblical principles, not Jeremiah Wright bombastic, divisive principles. And I said to Barack Obama, if you get elected, November the 5th, I'm coming after you. Because you'll be representing a government whose policies grind under people. All right? It's about policy, not the American people. Until racism and slavery are confessed and asked for forgiveness. We asked the Japanese to forgive us, but this country's leaders have refused to apologize. Our congregation feeds over 5,000 homeless and needy families every year while our government cuts food stamps and spends billions fighting in an unjust war in Iraq. My goddaughter's unit just arrived in Iraq this week, while those who call me unpatriotic have used their positions of privilege to avoid military service while sending.
You just mentioned that Senator Obama hadn't heard many of your sermons. Does that mean he's not much of a churchgoer, or does he doze off in the pews?
I just wanted to see, that's your question? That's your question. He goes to church about as much as you do. What did your pastor preach on last week? You don't know? Okay.
In your sermon, you said the government lied about inventing the HIV virus as a means of genocide against people of color. So I ask you, do you honestly believe your statement and those words?
Have you read Horowitz's book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola? Well, anytime a government can put together biological warfare to kill people and then get angry when those people use what we sold them, yes, I believe we are capable.
Media outlets were in full pitchfork mode, playing this interview over and over again. Pundits spending all day theorizing on how much damage this would do to the Obama campaign. Obama decides that he needs to do something drastic. Rather than come out with another run-of-the-mill press statement condemning the comments that the Reverend made, he decides to give a very in-depth speech about racial relations across America. Here's why a full-on speech and a full addressment of this issue is considered risky. Most voters did not have racial relations in their minds. They didn't care or try to focus in on this. They had bigger concerns: the failing Iraq war, the economy, jobs being lost to overseas cheap labor. Poverty doesn't discriminate by race, so why should they?
There are African Americans who don't think that you're black enough, who don't think that you have had the required experience.
The truth of the matter is, you know, when I'm walking down the south side of Chicago and visiting my barber shop and playing basketball in some of these neighborhoods, those aren't questions I get asked.
They think you're black.
As far as they can tell. I also notice when I'm catching a cab, nobody's confused about that either. If you look African American in this society, you're treated as an African American. And when you're a child in particular, that is how you begin to identify yourself.
How important is race in defining yourself?
I am rooted in the African American community, but I'm not defined by it. I am comfortable in my racial identity, but that's not all I am.
You think the country's ready for a black president?
Yes.
The Obama campaign intentionally focused on economic issues rather than racial ones, and it was one of the biggest reasons that he was so popular among rural white voters. But now he was forced to confront this racial issue head-on. This speech that Obama gave was one of the most pivotal moments of the campaign, and it would make or break his Democratic nomination.
The past isn't dead and buried. In fact, it isn't even past. Segregated schools were and are inferior schools. We still haven't fixed them 50 years after Brown versus Board of Education. This is the reality in which Reverend Wright and other African Americans of his generation grew up. They came of age in the late 50s and early 60s, a time when segregation was still the law of the land and opportunity was systematically constricted. The fact is that the comments that have been made and the issues that have surfaced over the last few weeks reflect the complexities of race in this country that we've never really worked through. A part of our union that we have not yet made perfect. I've heard the implication that my candidacy is somehow an exercise in affirmative action that is based solely on the desire of wild and wide-eyed liberals to purchase racial reconciliation on the cheap. And contrary to the claims of some of my critics, black and white, I have never been so naive as to believe that we can get beyond our racial divisions in a single election cycle. We would be making the same mistake that Reverend Wright made in his offending sermons about America. The profound mistake of Reverend Wright's sermons is not that he spoke about racism in our society. It's that he spoke as if our society was static, as if no progress had been made, as if this country, a country that has made it possible for one of his own members to run for the highest office in the land and build a coalition of white and black, young and old, is still irrevocably bound to a tragic past. What we know, what we have seen, is that America can change.
You know, it was a moment of real leadership. At that moment, I think, when he gave that race speech in Philadelphia, people saw a president.
This speech received rave reviews from voters and pundits alike. It effectively showed the establishment that he was, in fact, prepared to be a president. And in many voters' minds, they didn't just see a candidate anymore, they saw a leader.
Barack Obama, the projected winner in North Carolina. It is 7:30 on the East Coast. The polls have just closed in that state.
The pledged delegate count is basically over. If you could call an election on the delegate count and say, okay, who's going to have the most pledged delegates at the end of this process, it now appears like it's going to be impossible for Obama to lose his lead. And
did it just end tonight?
We now know who the Democratic nominee is going to be, and no one's going to dispute it, Keith. They know it, Obama knows it, and the voters who've been covering this race very intensely, following it very, very closely, now know it as well.
New York, you have 282 votes. How do you cast them?
On behalf of the great state of New York, let's declare together in one voice, right here, right now, that Barack Obama is our candidate and he will be our president.
Is there a second?
We're scared. We're scared of an Obama presidency.
I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that you do not have to be scared as President of the United States. Now, look,
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No.
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you. Thank you.
What newspapers and magazines did you regularly read?
All of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years. I have a vast variety of sources.
But he still has a stake in the company, so isn't that a conflict of interest? CBS projects that Senator Barack Obama of Illinois will be the next president of the United States.
This is the fastest rise to the presidency in more than 100 years. And the fact that the man propelling that rise was 4 years ago a state senator, in his own words, a skinny black kid with a funny name.
Walking down the streets, people were just screaming, Obama! And everywhere, you could just say Obama and 10 people would scream, Obama! And everywhere, in the bar, it was just joy.
I think the last time that we connected on this sort of universal level in this city was unfortunately after 9/11, and it was such a tragic time. And here to be able to connect on such a positive note and for such a positive reason is really, you can't say enough about how great it feels.
In churches, in bars, on the streets, Americans have been celebrating this great landmark in the long struggle for civil rights. In Chicago, the veteran black leader Jesse Jackson broke down in tears. In Atlanta, from the pulpit of Martin Luther King's old church, its pastor declared, "Tonight, we have seized the promise of America."
Their grandparents were the children of slaves. For them, America has crossed a rampart from which no retreat is possible.
It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
But though the registration and the turnout of Black America was the bedrock, Obama prevailed because of the true rainbow coalition he built.
In hindsight, you can criticize Obama for a lot of different things. The biggest one is that he didn't really bring about the grand change that he was talking about throughout his campaigns. Politicians are still controlled by lobbyists, and presidential campaigns have become more expensive than ever. But Obama did change one really important thing. He changed the narrative that only Washington insiders could get into Washington. By winning the presidency, Barack Obama showed a clear path to becoming the most powerful man in the world, despite having little to no political experience. Many people use the same tools and the same strategies that Obama used in order to win their own prospective races. Democrats like Cori Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and even Bernie Sanders made a fair shot to the presidency following Obama's model. And yes, even Donald Trump used the same tactics that Obama used to get into the presidency. This was one of his most famous clips from a Republican debate before he became the face of the party.
This is property from an elderly woman. Let me talk. Quiet. How tough is it? A lot of times, that's all of his donors and special interests out there. We have all donors in the audience, and the reason they're not loving me, the reason they're not loving me is I don't want their money. I'm going to do the right thing for the American public. I don't want their money. I don't need their money. And I'm the only one up here that can say that.
Trump fighting against the establishment. He looked like the outsider who couldn't be bought. It's one of the biggest reasons that people found him so appealing, saying often and loudly, "I am self-funding my own campaign." And then he took millions of dollars from various special interests in every single election that he's ever run, just like any other politician. And yes, just like Obama did in 2012, when he raised a large portion of his election money from various special interests, because he could no longer generate the same enthusiasm he had in 2008. Politicians require millions of people to vote for them, but they need billions of dollars to reach those people. American democracy isn't under threat, it's already been bought and paid for. And until this system changes, the only way you're going to get true outsider candidates is if you can get millions of people to raise billions of dollars. Thanks for watching. This documentary is based mainly on 3 books: David Axelrod's My 40 Years in Politics, David Plouffe's The Audacity to Win, and Barack Obama's A Promised Land. If you enjoyed this video, please consider joining my YouTube memberships or Patreon for exclusive content. If you wish to see more of these videos, give me more money.